Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I want to talk about the life of Zenith Greyrat, Rudeus' mother and Paul's first and best wife. This will include what we know about Zenith from before Rudeus was born, right up until the end of Mushoku Tensei, and so will contain spoilers about things like where Zenith ended up after the teleportation incident, as well as major spoilers about other family members such as Paul. As always, I'll keep the spoilers only to what I need to spoil to talk about Zenith, and won't be spoiling any major plot twists or plot points that I don't need to talk about Zenith's life. If you like videos about characters, lore, and general analysis of Mushoku Tensei, please consider subscribing because I make regular videos like this one about the series, as well as similar content for ReZero and some more general anime content, and I really need the love. So if you're still here after the spoiler warning, let's talk about Zenith. Zenith was originally born as Zenith Latreia, the second daughter of an earl from the country of Milis. We have seen the city she grew up in, Milicion, in the anime, because this is where Paul was based while he was searching for his family after the mass teleportation incident. Zenith's family were actually funding a lot of Paul's activities in doing this, despite not being big Paul fans. We have not yet seen Zenith's parents or her sister Therese in the anime, though they do appear later in the story. Therese would actually have appeared in a scene that was skipped from episode 18, and may well make an appearance in the upcoming Eris Goblin Slayer OVA, which I have a video about if you want to know more about that. During Zenith's childhood, she was considered the perfect standard of what a noble lady of Milis would be like. She achieved an intermediate level in healing magic and was expected to go and work as a healer in a hospital. But this wasn't what Zenith wanted from life. She ran away from her family at 15 to their great shock and disappointment, and she became an adventurer. At first, this didn't go too well for her. Healers can command high wages in adventuring parties, but due to her inexperience and lack of street smarts, Zenith was always being ripped off, and had parties basically using her as a meat shield. Eventually though, she ran into Paul, who saved her, and she joined his party, the Black Wolf's Fangs. Also in the party were several other characters we know: Elena Lise, Talhand, Ghislaine, and Gisu. The party was a close-knit group of people who didn't really fit in with most parties, either due to their races, given the party contained an elf, a dwarf, a demon race and a beast race, alongside the two humans Paul and Zenith, or because of their skills. Gisu, as a scout for instance, was very useful in the right team, but didn't have the combat or magic skills to do much on his own. Zenith was with the party for quite some time, and became very attracted to Paul. However, because of her religious upbringing and morals, the Milis faith is written to be very similar to the Catholic Church. She is put off by his womanizing ways. She tells him she'd only sleep with him if he promised to be faithful, and Paul promises he will. Zenith is very much his type, given the Zeniths Greyrat line Paul comes from has a renowned thing for women with big oppai, just like the Boreas Greyrat line Eris, Sauros and Philip come from, all have a fetish for beast men. It's a Greyrat thing. Still, Zenith doesn't really believe Paul, but starts a relationship with him anyway, thinking that if he breaks his promise, she can just end things with him. They haven't been together for too long though, when Zenith becomes pregnant with what will be Rudeus. This troubles Zenith, because she knows that she now isn't in a position to simply leave Paul if he doesn't keep his promise to her, and she still doesn't have a lot of confidence that he'll truly give up his womanizing ways. However, Paul does take responsibility, and he and Zenith marry. This is when Paul goes begging to his estranged family for the job as a knight in the rural village of Buena, which is where Rudeus is born. Paul does keep his word to be faithful to Zenith, but only for a few years, until Zenith is pregnant with their second child, Norn. This is when he sleeps with Lilia, the maid, leading to Rudeus's other sister, Aisha, being born. Zenith is persuaded to let Lilia and Aisha stay by Rudeus, though it does seem like she wouldn't have been the type of person to cast out a pregnant woman or a woman with a newborn baby anyway. Zenith agrees that Lilia can become Paul's second wife, and that Norn and Aisha will be raised together, though she does place the condition that Paul can only sleep with Lilia if Zenith is pregnant. Zenith and Lilia get along well and raise the babies together, right up until the point where the mass teleportation incident splits up the family and changes Zenith's life forever. Now, this is where we get to the big spoilers. While the anime has already shown us that Paul and Norn were teleported together, and Lilia and Aisha were teleported together too, and ended up in the Chiron Kingdom, Zenith's whereabouts are still unknown in the anime. Soon, however, Roxy will learn where she is, after meeting with Kishirika, the demon empress who gave Rudy his demon eye. Using one of her own demon eyes, Kishirika can locate Zenith, and tells Roxy she's trapped in a labyrinth in the Greyrat Kingdom. This labyrinth is in a region where there are many labyrinths that adventurers take on to make money, searching for magical items and so on, and as a former adventurer, it seems odd that Zenith would have been trapped in one for what ends up being years, without either escaping, finding a party who could send word back to her family, or simply dying. But this is no ordinary labyrinth. It's a labyrinth known as the Teleportation Labyrinth that contains all kinds of teleport traps that make it very easy to get lost or stuck. When Roxy finds out the location, Roxy and her party split up, with Roxy going to take this information to Paul, and Elise going to find Rudeus to tell him that his mother has been found, and that Paul and his allies will be going to go and get her, so he doesn't really need to do anything, and is free to carry on with what he was doing, which at this point was adventuring, starting college, and having erectile dysfunction, but that's another story. Paul later sends Norn and Aisha to live with Rudeus, as he and Lilia are setting off to take on the teleportation labyrinth. However, later, Rudeus receives a letter requesting that he goes to help, because Paul's group are getting nowhere in terms of reaching Zenith. Rudeus isn't sure whether to go. He's newly married and has a lot going on that I won't spoil. Plus, Hitagami, the god that appears in Rudeus's dreams and gives him advice, advises him not to go. Different people in Rudeus's life have different opinions on what he should do, but in the end, Rudeus can't face the idea of not giving his assistance, and so he goes. Elise goes with him. This will be the only time so far in this story that Rudeus hasn't followed Hitagami's advice. If you want to know more about Hitagami, by the way, I put up a video all about him yesterday. Now, the journey to the labyrinth should take a very long time. However, one of the people Rudeus met at college tells him a quicker way to get there, and I'm being deliberately vague about this. In any case, Rudeus and Elise make it to where Paul's group are staying far sooner than anyone expected. Rudeus's arrival is good news, given the party is in a bad situation. They haven't been able to find any sign of Zenith in the labyrinth, and Roxy fell victim to one of the teleportation traps and is also now missing. Rudeus and Elise don't just bring extra manpower either. While Rudeus was at the university, he was trying to find out the cause of the teleportation incident, and during his research, he found a book about the teleportation labyrinth, which he brought with him. Using this book as a guide to the dungeon, the party are able to rescue Roxy and continue on to find Zenith. But things aren't so easy once they do. Zenith is inside a huge magic crystal in the dungeon's boss room, defended by a Hydra that's immune to magic attacks. They manage to defeat it, but Paul is killed in the process. To make matters even more tragic, while Zenith is freed from the crystal and is alive, she seems to be nothing more than an empty shell of a person. She doesn't speak or react to anything around her. Rudeus brings her home to live with him and the rest of his family, along with Lilia, who will look after Zenith and work in Rudeus's house as a maid. Given Paul is dead, this also means Norn and Aisha will be living in Rudeus's care permanently now. Roxy also moves in, because due to events I won't spoil, she has ended up becoming Rudeus's second wife. They also get a pet armadillo as a result of this trip to rescue Zenith, so the household is definitely a lot bigger now. For a long time after this, everyone believes that Zenith is basically just a husk of a person, but over time they do notice that she reacts to things going on around her, in subtle ways like smiling at certain happy events. The family wonder if there's any chance for her to get better, but despite asking all kinds of knowledgeable people for help, there doesn't seem to be any solution to Zenith's state. Later, however, Rudeus, who has reported to Zenith's family in Milis by letter, letting them know she's been rescued and about her current state, receives a reply from Zenith's mother, demanding she bring Zenith to see her. Milis is a place with a lot of healers, and Rudeus has some other business he wants to attend to there, so he goes. When he arrives and meets with Zenith's mother Claire, however, it seems that Claire is planning to marry Zenith off to someone. Rudeus is horrified at this idea, given it seems like she's treating Zenith, who doesn't appear to know what's going on and who can't speak, as though she can just be married off to a noble to produce heirs. He has a huge argument with Claire and leaves with Zenith, but later, in a way I won't talk about here because it leads into massive spoilers for something else, Zenith is abducted. Aisha has accompanied Rudeus and Zenith on this trip, and between them they manage to get an idea of where Zenith is being held, and that it was indeed Claire who was behind it. However, Rudeus is already acquainted with various important people in Milis, including the Pope, and a girl known only as the Miko, a blessed child who has telepathic powers, and who is guarded very carefully by the country. The knight in charge of guarding her is also someone Rudeus knows, Zenith's sister, Therese. I won't go into exactly what happens here, as it's very complicated to explain without all of the stuff about the various Milis factions, but ultimately Claire is arrested, and her husband, who was unaware she'd been doing this stuff at all, also agreed to take responsibility. Rudeus has a role in their sentencing, but Zenith herself actually slaps him, and this leads him to hearing out Claire's full story about what she was planning to do with Zenith. It turns out Claire had been researching a cure for Zenith, but the only story of a similar case she could find was of a woman who'd been found in Crystal, who had, according to what she heard, been cured by having sex with lots of men. Claire, as religious as she was still willing to try this with Zenith, but thought it was too appalling to involve anyone else in, and so had been arranging it in secret. Now here, Rudeus is able to tell her that that wouldn't have worked. Claire asks if he had also considered it, and he says that no, the reason he knows it won't work is because he knows the woman in that story. It's Elena Lise. If you want to know more about how Elena Lise ended up in a similar situation to Zenith 200 years earlier, by the way, I do have a video all about that. Elena Lise didn't recover her memories at all, and the fact she had sex with a lot of men was because of a curse, which Zenith evidently doesn't also have, rather than because it was the cure. This ends this misunderstanding, but during all of this, the Miko is asked if she would be able to see into Zenith's memories, given that is part of her power. She agrees to do this, but when she does, it seems that Zenith is not the husk of a person they all thought. Zenith has memories of things that have happened recently, including conversations she's been having with Rudeus's young daughter, Lara. Lara's mother is Roxy, and it seems Lara has the Migard telepathic ability that Roxy does not, and has been conversing with Zenith telepathically. Essentially, Zenith has become a Miko herself. She has telepathic abilities, but as a downside is always in a kind of dreamlike state, and can't speak normally. She's actually very sensitive to what's going on around her emotionally, and contrary to what people around her thought, she knew about things like Paul's death. Zenith never goes back to normal in the story, but now everyone knows the true nature of her condition, they can be a lot more accommodating to her. And of course, as Lara gets older, she sometimes serves as an interpreter for Zenith because she can always communicate with her. Lara acts like this is a hassle though, so they don't ask her to do it that often. Later in the Redundancy side story series that takes place after the climax of the main series, the family all take a trip to Milis again, and once again meet up with the Miko, so they can hear what Zenith's thoughts have been. It seems like Zenith is actually pretty happy and enjoying family life in her own way. So that's the story of Zenith Greyrat, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you very much to my supporters on Patreon who are on screen right now, and to everyone who subscribes to my channel and watches my videos. Thank you for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.